They thought he was an easy target until they learned who they were dealing with. The night was quiet, the kind that wraps a neighborhood in stillness. Leon Walker, a 36-year-old off-duty SWAT officer, walked with purpose down the tree-lined streets of a suburban neighborhood in Indianapolis. His shift had ended hours ago, but tonight he decided to clear his mind with a walk. The day had been draining, and the rhythmic crunch of his boots on the sidewalk offered some solace from the intensity of his job. Leon wasn't dressed to stand out. Black jeans, a simple hoodie and sneakers, but his stature did at 154 with a muscular build. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone trained to handle the unexpected. Yet despite his experience, Leon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Tonight the houses around him were dark, with porch lights flickering dimly or extinguished altogether. A dog barked in the distance, breaking the silence for just a moment. Before it was gone, he glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. Most people were asleep. Leon wasn't worried though. This neighborhood wasn't unfamiliar to him. He'd walked these streets before, knew the corners, the shortcuts, and the patterns of life here. He was only a few blocks from his cousin's house, where he planned to crash for the night. As he turned onto a quieter street, a car rolled past, its engine humming low. Its occupants slowed as they passed him, peering through the windows. Leon didn't react. His training taught him better than that, but his senses heightened. He could feel eyes on him, and not the kind born of curiosity. The car disappeared around the corner, but minutes later the sound of footsteps emerged. A group of men, 5 or 6, appeared at the end of the block. They moved with a casual arrogance, talking loudly and laughing in a way that wasn't meant to be friendly. Leon instinctively shifted his pace, keeping steady but alert. The group noticed him, and their voices dropped as they changed direction to intercept his path. It didn't take long for their intentions to become clear. They weren't out for a late-night stroll. The leader, a man in his late 20s, with a smug grin and a swagger that screamed trouble, stepped forward. The rest fanned out behind him like a pack, waiting for a signal. "Hey buddy," the man called out, his tone dripping with mock friendliness. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Leon stopped. He wasn't one to run from confrontation, but he also knew better than to escalate a situation unnecessarily. With calm, steady eyes, he looked at the group just walking. He replied simply, his voice low and controlled. The group exchanged glances, smirking at each other, as though they'd just been handed a gift. But Leon didn't flinch. Years of dealing with high-pressure situations had taught him that fear, or even the appearance of it, could shift the balance of power. Still, Leon could feel the weight of the moment growing heavier. They didn't know who he was or what he was capable of, but soon they would. But the night wasn't about to let Leon pass without testing every ounce of his patience and restraint. The leader took a step closer, the smirk on his face turning into a sneer. "Funny you don't look like you belong here," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. The others chuckled, their laughter echoing down the empty street. Leon's expression didn't change. He held his ground, his posture neutral but firm. "I didn't realize walking was a privilege," he replied, his tone calm, almost disarming. The leader's eyes narrowed, his ego pricked by Leon's unbothered demeanor. "You've got jokes, huh? I don't think you get it. We don't take kindly to strangers around here." The group moved in closer, tightening their formation. Leon's eyes flicked between them, taking in every detail. The way one guy kept clenching and unclenching his fists, another nervously glancing around, as if to check for witnesses, and the third holding something small in his hand, perhaps a key or a pocket knife. Leon's mind worked quickly, assessing the situation. His training had taught him to prioritize control and de-escalation, but he also knew how fast things could spiral. He stayed composed, his hands hanging loose at his sides, ready for anything. "Stranger," Leon said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm just passing through. I don't want any trouble." The leader scoffed. "Trouble? No, we're just having a friendly chat." His tone dripped with sarcasm as he gestured to the others. "Ain't that right, boys?" The group laughed again, but it wasn't a sound that came from humor. It was a warning, a signal that they were testing him. Leon felt the tension shift, like a rubber band stretched too tight, ready to snap. "You're a long way from home, ain't you?" another man chimed in, his voice louder and more aggressive. "Walking around here like you own the place." Leon didn't bite. Instead, he shifted his weight slightly, a subtle movement that allowed him to keep his balance and maintain a clear view of all 6 men. He knew their behavior wasn't about him specifically. It was about power control and the group feeding off each other's bravado. But their next move would determine his. He didn't want to engage unless he had no other choice. "You done yet?" Leon asked, his voice calm but firm. The question hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment there was silence. The leader's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. It was clear that Leon wasn't reacting the way they expected. He wasn't afraid, wasn't cowering or making excuses. He was standing his ground without escalating, but that only seemed to fuel their anger. The leader's grin returned sharper. "This time not yet. We were just getting started." But they didn't know the storm they were about to unleash, and Leon wasn't about to make it easy for them. The group closed in, their footsteps slow and deliberate, like predators circling prey. Leon's heartbeat quickened, but his face remained composed. Every step they took was calculated in his mind. Distances measured, movements tracked, exit strategies forming. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't about to be cornered either. "You're awfully quiet," the leader taunted, tilting his head as if trying to provoke a reaction. "What's the matter, cat? Got your tongue?" Another man chimed in, his voice tinged with mockery. "Maybe he's scared." "You scared her?" Leon took a slow, steady breath. "No," he said plainly, his tone unwavering. The leader didn't like that answer. His smug grin twisted into something darker. "You're a tough guy, huh? Walking through our neighborhood like you're untouchable." He gestured to the others. "Maybe we should show him how we handle tough guys around here." The group murmured their agreement, their confidence growing in their numbers. One of them reached into his pocket, pulling out a knife. The blade glinted faintly under the street lights. Leon's eyes locked on the weapon, his senses sharpening. He didn't flinch, didn't take a step back. Instead, his voice dropped, calm but firm. "Put that away before you regret it." The man with the knife hesitated, caught off guard by Leon's tone, but the leader wasn't ready to back down. "You think you're in charge here?" he barked, stepping closer. Leon's calm broke just slightly, his voice growing colder. "I'm giving you a chance to walk away. Take it." The tension reached its peak, the air thick with the unspoken question of who would make the first move. One of the men lunged forward, shoving Leon in the chest. Leon barely moved, his body rooted like a tree. "Big guy here." The man sneered, emboldened by the shove, but before he could say another word, Leon acted in one fluid motion. He grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it, forcing the knife to the ground. The man cried out in pain, dropping to his knees. The group froze, stunned by the speed and precision of Leon's movements. "I told you," Leon said, his voice calm but commanding. "Walk away." But the leader wasn't ready to let it go. "Get him," he barked, and the group charged. Leon moved like water, his training taking over. He sidestepped the first man, sending him stumbling into another. A quick elbow to the gut dropped the next one, leaving him gasping for air. Each movement was efficient, calculated, not a single ounce of energy wasted. The group quickly realized they were outmatched, but their pride wouldn't let them stop. One after another they tried to overwhelm him, but Leon's years of experience shone through. He wasn't just defending himself, he was controlling the chaos, making sure no one left with anything worse than bruises and lessons they wouldn't forget. But even as they began to falter, the leader wasn't done, and his desperation would push the situation to its breaking point. The leader's face was flushed with anger, his confidence crumbling. As his crew stumbled around him, defeated one by one, he backed away slightly, his chest heaving as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a second blade, this one larger, more menacing. The metal gleamed under the streetlight. As he gripped it tightly, his hand trembling slightly. Despite the bravado he tried to maintain. "Think you're some kind of hero?" the leader snarled, his voice cracking under the weight of his frustration. "Let's see how tough you really are." Leon's expression hardened, but his stance remained composed. His voice dropped into a lower, more authoritative tone. "You've made enough mistakes tonight. Don't make another one." The leader hesitated, the words hitting him like a brick wall. But pride, or maybe fear of losing face in front of his crew, kept him rooted in place. He lunged forward, the knife aimed directly at Leon. Time seemed to slow. Leon pivoted, sidestepping the attack with precision. In one swift motion he disarmed the leader, twisting the knife from his grip and tossing it out of reach. With a controlled strike to the man's chest, Leon sent him stumbling backward, falling to the ground in a heap. The others, who had been gathering their courage to rejoin the fight, froze in place. Their leader, their symbol of power, lay on the pavement, defeated and humiliated. The air around them shifted, the weight of their arrogance replaced by a creeping realization of what they had underestimated. Leon stood over the group, his breathing steady, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything at first, letting the silence speak for itself. Then, in a calm but firm voice, he said, "You're lucky I'm not on duty. If I were, you'd all be in handcuffs right now. But you're walking away tonight. Remember this moment the next time you think about targeting someone because you think they're weak." His words landed like thunder. The men looked at each other, their bravado completely shattered. One by one they began to back away, muttering apologies and excuses as they disappeared into the shadows of the neighborhood. But the leader, still on the ground, didn't move right away. His pride was bruised more than his body, and it was clear he wasn't used to being bested. Leon crouched down to his level, meeting his eyes. "Strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how many people you've got behind you," Leon said quietly. "It's about knowing when to walk away. Think about that." Leon straightened and turned his back to the group as he picked up his pace, putting distance between himself and the chaos he had just ended. But the echoes of the encounter would linger in the night, leaving an impact far greater than the fight itself. Leon walked away, his steps deliberate and steady, but his mind raced. He replayed the encounter in his head, not out of regret, but as a trained reflex. Every detail mattered: the way they had surrounded him, the flash of the blade, the fear in their eyes when they realized they had miscalculated. It wasn't the first time he had been judged unfairly, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. By the time he reached his cousin's house, the adrenaline in his veins had begun to ebb. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow that felt almost out of place. After what had just happened, he paused for a moment before heading inside, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The next morning, Leon sat at the kitchen table with his cousin, sipping coffee as sunlight streamed through the window. His cousin, a school teacher named Reggie, noticed the tension in Leon's shoulders. "You good?" Reggie asked, concern etched on his face. Leon nodded, though his gaze was distant. "Ran into some trouble last night. A group of guys thought they could intimidate me." Reggie frowned. "In this neighborhood, man? That's not surprising, but still. You all right?" "I'm fine," Leon replied. "They walked away with bruises, but they'll live. Hopefully they'll think twice before they try it again." Reggie shook his head, a mix of frustration and admiration in his expression. "You handled it better than most people would have, but it's not right. You shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing." Leon sighed, setting his mug down. "No, I shouldn't, but it's the reality we're living in. The only way to change it is to keep holding people accountable without stooping to their level." Later that day, as Leon prepared to head back to his own home, he saw a small group of teenagers hanging out near the corner where the confrontation had taken place. For a moment, he thought they were the same men from the night before, but as he got closer, he realized they were just kids, laughing and chatting without a care in the world. Leon slowed his pace, watching them for a moment. He thought about how different their lives might be if they carried the weight of bias and hate. He thought about the choices he had made the night before, the choice not to use excessive force, the choice to let them walk away with their dignity bruised but their lives intact. As he turned the corner, Leon's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Reggie. "Proud of you, man. Keep being you." Leon smiled faintly, tucking the phone back into his pocket. He didn't need praise or recognition, but knowing his actions had made a small ripple in someone else's understanding of the world was enough. But the scars of the encounter, invisible though they were, served as a reminder. Justice doesn't always wear a badge, and strength doesn't always roar. As Leon drove home, the events of the night before lingered in his mind. He wasn't angry. He hadn't been angry during the confrontation either. What he felt was something deeper, a sadness rooted in the reality that prejudice still thrived in places it had no business being. He thought about the group of men, how their arrogance had crumbled when faced with someone they didn't understand. They hadn't seen him as a person at first, just a target, a stereotype they could intimidate. But the truth is, people like them weren't born hateful. Somewhere along the line, they had learned to see differences as threats instead of opportunities to connect. Leon hoped that by letting them walk away, he'd planted a seed, something that might grow into reflection, even change. Maybe they'd think twice before harassing someone else. Maybe they'd start to question their assumptions. And for Leon, the night had reaffirmed something he already knew. True strength lies in restraint, in choosing to de-escalate. When violence seems like the easiest option, anyone can throw a punch or hurl an insult, but it takes real courage to stand tall without losing your integrity. To anyone watching this story unfold, there's a lesson to take away. Don't let fear or ignorance guide your actions. Take the time to see people for who they are, not for the labels or biases the world places on them. They thought power came from numbers, threats, and intimidation. But that night, they faced a man who showed them the truth. Real strength isn't loud, reckless, or cruel. It's controlled, disciplined, and unshaken by fear. And by the time the night was over, they weren't the ones in control anymore. If this story made you think, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping stories. Because real power isn't about how many people stand behind you, it's about standing strong, even when you stand alone.